Over this past weekend, I competed in what I believe is probably one of the first US tournaments for Riftbound. This was a 2K event held in Tacoma, Washington by Laughing Dragon. While the game has had its release in China for the past few months, it has just had its release weekend over here in the US. For people who have been following the meta developments, this is nothing new. This is not reinventing the wheel, and you can just kind of click off. For my viewers or new players who have not been keeping up with the meta developments, we'll kind of go through what has kind of led to Kaisa's dominance, and we'll run through the card choices and things that I think went well and what things I would change, especially with the newest information of the latest regional that happened in China over the weekend, about the same time that this tournament was taking place. A helpful barometer, I think, for understanding this is that you want to win the game via double conquering. This is not a deck that holds well, so you want to win the game by playing on twos, basically. So you want to try to fight for even numbers in the end game. So like you want to try to go from like 4 to 6. Like I wasn't sweating it too much if it's like, oh man, I'm holding to 3 and I'm like punting the game or whatever. Like it's not a thing. Like you take the points when you can get them, obviously. It's really simplified when you go to 6 points, right? And you can do things where like you hold, retreat back to base on 6, and then you could just set yourself up where like you would just have an entire back row in base. You have nothing on the battlefields. You're at 6. Your opponent can't win the game or whatever. And now they need to commit to battlefields to like hold basically, or have combat tricks. And then you are just going to pressure the double conquer on the final turn. And that was how this deck won a lot of the time. So being on 6 is just really good. This deck cannot hold very well. So trying to win the game by going to 7 and then like stacking out a battlefield is not always super helpful. With that being said though, you have enough removal spells that you can do it. Like, I mean, you can just sit on 7, like your opponent pushes in and you have like Void Seeker, Smokescreen, and like Stupefy held up, and like they literally just can't do anything. So this deck can do whatever it wants. But that was kind of how I played it, like with that kind of macro strategy where it's like you play aggro well when you double conquer, and this deck can double conquer so easily. Get in the habit sometimes of pulling units off your base. You're not a deck that wants to hold. So like if you ready at the start of the turn and get your hold points or whatever, you can just move stuff back and then just try to like go and push and reconquer again. So don't overextend on battlefields. That would be my advice. So to kind of start with Kaisa as a legend. So Kaisa is very powerful because she actually just lets you get power. Some leaders like Darius will, give you resources, but that's not really the same as getting to cheat the power costs on the cards. So being able to tap as a reaction any point during your turn or your opponent's turn to add a power to play only on spells, which is not really a hindrance to this deck at all, is just incredibly powerful. So for people who are familiar with the rules of Riftbound, there are runes that you're going to be getting every single turn, and you'll have these cards that have these power costs in them. So something like Hextech Ray, super easy example. You would normally have to pay 1, and then after paying, you would recycle a red rune back to your deck. Kaisa can just tap and add that power cost for you, so you don't de-ramp yourself. So you never are losing resources. They have clearly kind of set up the game's core engine to work around these tempo plays, where Hextech Ray is a very powerful card. It's basically Lightning Bolt, but they have sort of adjusted it by making you go down a resource permanently, right, until you get those resources back towards the end of the game. They have tried to balance these very powerful cards around these power costs. However, the issue becomes that Kaisa just becomes the most efficient way to play these cards because you're never actually losing the resources. It's way better than getting a resource per turn because you are able to pay for these power costs, which can also help sometimes if you didn't even have the runes to actually pay for those colors themselves. It's just very, very powerful. So the way that this deck plays, if you have played Magic, would be like Izzet Delver. Like this deck is very tempo based. It plays a lot of 2-for-1s, maintaining early aggro on the board. The main goal of this deck is to score early, play lots of combat tricks, efficiently clear your opponent, and just kind of keep them off of battlefields. And then you have some good endgame bombs to kind of like speed up that final clock towards the end of the game. If you are coming from a game like Flesh and Blood, this would kind of be something like Azalea, a deck that is naturally kind of disruptive, but attacks the game from a aggro axis. So you're not playing like control. Like this is, even though this deck has a ton of removal spells, like cards like Falling Star, Void Seeker, Smokescreen, etc. This is not a deck that's trying to play control. The point of this deck is not just pointing and killing things on sight, but it wants to play like that because of the creatures that it's using to swarm the battlefield. You play a lot of good aggressive drops. Your Kaisa champion is very good at just pressuring battlefields very quickly. This deck generates a ton of card draw, plays combat tricks, has really good efficient early bodies, things like Ravenbloom Student. So you're playing an efficient aggro deck that also just happens to play a ton of 2-for-1s and combat tricks. This deck feels incredibly powerful in set 1. And I do really think that part of the issue of this set 1 meta is just how efficient these removal cards are. So cards like Falling Star are just amazing 2-for-1s, just stapled right onto the card. And it's not even just a 2-for-1 because this can be used to clear something very tall as well. It's just like the most efficient card you could possibly imagine. With Kaisa's ability, you're only putting back 1 resource on this. Like, it's just so good. Like, these removal cards just completely outclass so many of the units. I feel the same way about Yi getting cards like, Defy and Charm. These are just like powerhouses compared to what these units are doing. I mean, outside of something, like Thousand Tail Watcher, Darius, I mean, like these removal effects just kind of clear everything. But we'll start from the very top. So we're running an even split of the Fury and Mind Runes. And then when we go to the battlefield, so you're going to start with one of these and play per game. You'll have to swap it out every single time. We have Zon Warrens. This works really well with your Kaisa. So your Kaisa that gets to start and play. We also have an additional one in the deck. Just has Accelerate. So it can immediately come in ready if you are on curve to do it, but just going first, playing a 2-drop, turn 2, playing the Kaisa in base can also be totally fine. When you conquer, you're going to draw 1. Already insane, right? Like, we're already looking at card advantage. And then when you combine it with something like the Zon Warrens, you can stack the trigger, so you can draw off the Kaisa when you conquer here, and then discard something from your hand afterwards, so you have perfect information over everything in your hand, and then you can draw another card. So filtering on 2 cards every single time just going to help you find those power cards, or just fix your hand to perfectly hold the battlefield. And then we have Targon's Peak. This is really good if you are going first, because you are just able to play a 2-drop, and then turn 2 you can like conquer on this, play Kaisa, and normally you would tap out and leave yourself open, but you're able to ready 2 runes, which means you can play everything from Hextech Ray to Smoke Screen, so you're basically completely insulated. Void Gate was the mistake. This one I did not like. It sounds cool in theory because it means your removal spells are better. What the problem is that everyone wants to play Kaisa, so this one's actually kind of bad for you because in the mirror it kind of does nothing. It makes the removal spells more efficient, and after watching the latest regionals, I believe that there are much better battlefields you can run. So I really liked the one where if you hold, you draw a card. This is very good into decks like Yi or Aurora decks specifically. I think this deck is naturally weak to Aurora if you built it like the way I did. I've seen the Kaisa list adapt, and like the one theoretical counter has been kind of like mitigated by different battlefield choices. There's also the Dreaming Tree, where if you target, you will draw an extra card. That's really good because of cards like Retreat, which is also very fantastic in the mirror. So you can move something there. If your opponent tries to remove it, you could play Retreat, targeting it, dodge the removal spell, but then also get an extra card in the process. So really clean stuff. I think that this one was a mistake. And the main deck itself, we can run this through. Once again, like if you have played this game before, you've seen like a million lists like this. This is geared for, people who are new to the game, who are just trying to see what's going on here. So I think we'll start with like basically like the removal spells. But we have Stupefy. This is a cantrip. I give someone -1. It's just a really clean combat spell. It doesn't cost you power. Not that it would matter in Kaisa, but this works really well with like Ravenbloom Student. Like your opponent gets got, because like you're basically presenting like 4 might in a combat trick, because your Ravenbloom would go up to 3 and then their thing would get -1. It's just really good stuff. Cleave is really good at retaking battlefields, getting 1 for 3 basically that you can use as a combat trick, or you can play in base. Hextech Ray, no explanation needed. You move your thing to your field, your opponent tries to take it with something, or they try to do an early conquer. You just wipe their thing out and you don't play the power. So that's kind of the overall thing with all these is you'll see these power costs and they don't really actually matter. So you just get to play all these completely efficiently. Retreat we run 2 copies of, mainly for Kaisa mirrors, and also some cards like in the E deck she'll have things, like Charm, where like normally you would just like lose the unit and instead you can bounce it back to hand and get your rune back, which is pretty good. So it kind of ends up being neutral. But overall, it's a pretty clean combat trick. I think this works really well with the Dreaming Tree, though. So once again, I think I would have made that choice to include it. But this is also good, like if they're going to, Snapvine or Dead Bloom you, this can just save a really important card, especially something like with Accelerate. So you can think of cards like Darius or Watcher or Kaisa. things that you can bounce back to hand and then immediately like replay. Falling Star we already talked about. There's like really like nothing to say about this card. I think it's like probably the most broken card in the deck. 3 to a unit twice means that you can kill 2 things, you can kill 1 thing. It doesn't require it to be a battlefield, so if your opponent is setting up in base to push to potentially try to swing the game, you can just completely time lock them by targeting the things in their base. It also means that, you know, cards like Champ Victor, not that anyone is playing that deck anymore, but because of cards like this, right, like you can't play it, because if there are cards that kind of synergize with hanging out in your base and generating value, targeting Star just negates all of it and goes straight to the source. A Smokescreen is a really good combat trick. -4 is really good. This has been kind of like dicey, and some people started moving it only to the sideboard for certain matchups. I'm still playing in the main board. This is really good against things like, you know, Snapvine, Dead Bloom, and it's just like another really like clean like combat trick basically. We have Void Seeker, super obvious. It's a 2 for 1, and like this is how this entire deck works, right? Like everything here is just like incredibly efficient. Everything here is a clean 2 for 1. This one getting to hit something for 4 and then redraw you a card. Incredibly powerful. Like imagine in the mirror, like they go to push with their Kaisa unit and you just like completely wipe it off the board and still get the card back. It's neutral, like absolutely incredible stuff happening here. And then we have a 1-of copy of a Kithian Rain. I'm getting to split up 6 damage. Obviously very powerful, lets you close out a game. It has the same power as Falling Star where you can kill 1 massive thing, or you can kill 6 tiny things, right? It's just, it does everything you want it to do. Getting this flexibility of splitting up however you want is very good. Only on 1 copy because, you know, in the faster matchups and things like that, you don't really want to draw this. And also with it being so expensive, it's just better just have it 1 copy and then adding more from the sideboard. And then we'll go through our units. So we have 2 copies of Kaisa. One of these is going to start in, you know, like the pseudo commander zone to play whenever you need to. The other one's in the deck just because it's so good. You don't mind playing this in base, you know, tapped and then eventually conquering it the next turn, you know, like if you're going first and you're, you know, playing on 2s basically, or if you're, you know, going second and then you go to 5, you'd accelerate if you want. I mean, this is really easy to do, right? Like if you have like Targon's Peak, like on 5 resources, you could accelerate it, capture the Targon's Peak, and then like untap 2 and like hold Smokescreen, and now they just can't get rid of it unless if you're playing the mirror and they have like Void Seeker, right? You just have really easy ways to protect this card. Incredibly powerful. Just whenever it conquers, it draws. Like, so you can like conquer with this, draw a card, next turn you can get your holding point, move back to base, hold up removal spells so that they can't actually retake any of the battlefields, or you'll just have combat tricks to push on your own turn, you know, cards like Darius or Watcher, and then like on the next turn you'll untap and then you can go and reconquer these battlefields, re-trigger Kaisa again and repeat this. And then we have all of our early drops. I actually think that partially the weakness of this deck, at least for how I played over the weekend, was I probably wanted maybe like 2 extra 2 drops. So maybe I would have gone up to maybe 2 or maybe 3 copies of Pouty Poro. I'm not really sure. Maybe that's a bit excessive, but I think just having the early 2 drop makes such a big difference for this deck. And there was a couple times during the weekend where I kind of tripped up on getting that, like, you know, turn 1 play going first. Going first in this game is incredibly broken. Somehow they didn't really balance it because they let you draw if you go first, which I just, for the life of me, I just can't understand why that was the design decision. I feel like every other card game I've ever played has balanced the inherent strength of being, you know, the first person to take game actions in a match by giving the other person the card draw. But for some reason in this game, the only benefit that you have going second is that you get 1 more rune, and it's not like you get, you know, that advantage every single turn or whatever. You just get it 1 time. So I, for the life of me, just cannot understand why. But what I'm saying here is that, like, having that 2 drop, if you go first in this deck and you just have a 2 drop, I just think that you win. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's so good. So you always want a hard mull for a 2 drop, and I think that I probably could have added a couple extra copies, because I think the only, you know, games I would lose were games where I just didn't have the 2 drop on turn 1, so probably not enough. But we have Ravenbloom Student. This one's incredibly powerful, works with all your combat tricks. They're just really efficient body. Watchful Sentry is really good because you can play it on turn 1, move it into the battlefield to score, and then threaten that hold point. And then if your opponent ever wants to remove it or push into the battlefield, you get the card draw back. And then at that point, you'll have other units in base. You just go and reconquer, but you got that point and you got that additional card draw. So it ends up being neutral. I think this card is actually really good. Lecturing Yordle is here as an early drop, but it's also very good if you go, you know, second. You can play this, and then it's also card neutral. Like, you just want cards that can trip in this deck. It's all efficient stuff. We have Noxus Hopeful. This is really good. Like, if you go first, for instance, you could, you know, play on 4 resources. You could play like a 2 drop and then play Noxus Hopeful in base. This just curves out really well. You know, you can play like a removal spell, clear battlefields, move in, conquer it, and then play this like with 2 resources in that battlefield and threaten to hold it. I mean, 4 might is just a lot. It's a really good break point in this game. Sprite Mother just lets you recapture tempo really quickly. Playing it and then getting that immediate ready 3 might sprite means that you can do things where like you are in base, you can move into one battlefield, conquer it, get a point. You can play Sprite Mother in base, make the sprite, and then go conquer the other one, get 2 points in a turn. It's just really efficient to be playing for 2-point turns every single turn with this deck. It's just kind of how it wants to play. You want to win the game via double conquer in the end game. You are better off, trying to go from 6 to 8 rather than having 7 points and trying to hold for the final point. So Sprite Mother just lets you get those like easy double conquers. And it also lets you fight for board control really quickly. And then the Sprite Mother can just try to, go conquer a battlefield like the next turn. So this is very efficient for what it does. Darius feels like an absolute powerhouse of the deck. So 5-drop, when you play your second card in a turn, you give it +2 and you ready it. It itself will count itself for the second card. So you can like play something, do whatever, play a Darius. It triggers itself when you play it. And then it's basically, 7 accelerate. You can also do things where like on a future turn, like you push your Darius in, it conquers. Next turn, you ready it. You could move it back to base, play 2 things, ready it again, and then move it to another battlefield. So you're able to like double conquer with this like pretty cleanly in a turn. So just helping you play for those 2s. Thousand Tail Watcher is like the bomb of like set 1 creatures in my mind. Like this thing is just incredible. So 7-drop, you can accelerate it for that extra 1. And then when you play it, you give all enemy units -3 might this turn. This just means that in every single endgame scenario where your opponent is like holding battlefields, like they have units on the base, and you're at 6, you just like win the game unless if they have like the perfect like combat trick to answer it. Let's say they have like 3 units spread out, like 2 on one base, 1 on another. Like in that scenario, you're getting like -9 might reduction. Like this thing gets +9. To put it in math terms, this is like a 16 might accelerate or whatever. Falling star 2 things because they're like completely dropped off in terms of stats, and then they just die to the falling star. Like really crazy stuff happens. And I think that this is like basically how you win most of your matchups, to be honest. Like you just need to drop one of these in the end game. So, and then our sideboard was toolboxing. I don't really like how I built my sideboard, to be honest. This was taking a lot of inspiration from the China regional winner. I do not normally build sideboards like this. Normally I build sideboards to include like 2 to 3 copies of tech cards. I'm still trying to learn how I want a sideboard in this game, but kind of what we did was we just added one of copies for cards I wanted to go up to a max playset of in certain matchups. So like cleave into things like Yi, where you need to fight for the board. Less important in the mirror, because in the mirror you're more concerned with like using the tempo based spells, cards like retreat, right? You can go, it's like 3 retreat in the mirror. You could go to 3 copies of smokescreen like into Aurora decks, things like that. Darius into some of the more grindy decks. The only cards that kind of actually come in that are not like already present in the main board are going to be cards like Mundo, which I did not like. I like the concept of having the Zon Warrens and being able to filter and then play this into decks like Aurora, or Yi decks in general, and just being able to actually have like a late game bomb. But I think you could have just played different battlefields and just like held and gotten more advantage holding early into those decks and not needed to play like this really expensive non-accelerated unit in the end game. Singularity was definitely sick though. I really liked having the Singularity. Time Warp, I think, is probably something I would have gone up to 2 copies of. This card just feels insane. I noticed that some other Kaisa players in the tournament were playing it in the main board. It was the person I lost to in both Swiss and top 8. The card is just really, really powerful. I mean, you just end the game 1 turn early. It just seems good all around. Originally, I had the 1/2 copy because I was like, well, I want to play this into Aurora decks where if we go to the late game, they win, and this just accelerates the game an entire turn. So in my mind, I wanted just for that, but after seeing it, I just think it's really good in general. So the idea of the sideboard was just kind of like flexing these one of toolboxes. But like what we just talked about, there was a recent regional that happened about the same time. And we see overall, these lists feel very solved, but there are definitely some differences. We see 2 copies of Time Warp and Rain in the main board, which I guess, makes sense to me. Like these cards are very powerful. I, lost a lot to Time Warp over the weekend. So I think that would make sense to me. And then if we look over here in the sideboard, we see Smokescreen is actually moved over to the sideboard along with Voidseeker, which is pretty interesting because I think Voidseeker is very powerful to me. So I'd definitely be interested to know the reasoning behind it. But some things that were not in my list at all that are here are there is a vanilla 8 might unit, which I think is pretty good actually. I was talking with the person I lost to in top 8 who was also on it, and the theory is that it curves out really well with Time Warp because you're able to play it and then easily double conquer and then play the Time Warp on curve with it. We see the anti-gear card. I've forgotten the name, but it's the 2 copies of the 5 double red anti-Aurora stuff. So I kind of like this list because I just feel like between those and the fields that it was running, you're just not really going to lose to Aurora all that often. And then we see progress state to draw 4. I imagine it's probably for the mirror and against Aurora. But overall, yeah, so that was another take on it. So, this was what I played, but there was also the other list as well. So you can take all this with a grain of salt. So overall, that was the deck. Till next time, thank you for watching.